A real crime. In a series of podcasts, I want you to travel down some lonely roads with me. These are the roads I traveled with families who never got to say goodbye to loved ones. These family members were fated to live the rest of their lives waiting and wondering. I will begin this series with unsolved murders, but I will also revisit cases that include arrests because aspects of the case are worth re-examining. I wrote these stories when I worked as a reporter for the Charleston Gazette. I appreciate you joining me today. With this episode, I'm pausing for now on the subject of child abuse. I understand how difficult this material has been to listen to. All of these cases disturbed me terribly as I covered them. I think today's subject deserves a special place in our thoughts. Episode 17, A Black Hole. Jeffrey Scott LaRock believed that if he could learn how to reverse the flow of his heart's blood, he could create a black hole. LaRock also believed that he was the American writer Jack London reincarnated. Both of these beliefs might make him an interesting party guest, but LaRock did not socialize much. When people observed him, they let him know they disliked how he treated his infant son. Sadly, I have listened in court to horrible descriptions of child abuse, but I never jumped in my seat until I heard a description of what LaRock did to his 19-month-old son. The baby's mother testified that her husband threw the child from the living room into the bathroom, where he hit his head on the tub. I literally jumped at the thoughts of that child crashing into the hard surface of the bathtub. I think we all search for answers when we hear such horrible stories. LaRock, who was raised in Michigan, testified to a frightening childhood. He said each time his mother left the house, his older brother tried to smother him with a pillow. His wife testified that LaRock told her his father attempted to hang two of his brothers. And then there's the story of his brother Mark. LaRock told jurors that his brother Mark died before LaRock was born. He also believed that Mark's spirit was reincarnated into him. But other people testified that Mark never existed. With his dead brother, writer Jack London, and London's father's spirit, it probably got crowded inside LaRock. As an English major, I have read London's writing, but thinking of LaRock, I searched out more of London's biography. London's mother was a spiritualist, a person who believed she could get in touch with the dead. She also channeled the spirits of an Indian chief. The man who was probably London's father was an astrologer. When London's mother told him she was pregnant, he wanted her to abort. She refused, but she shot herself. She survived, but temporarily deranged. After he was arrested, LaRock wrote several letters to his wife Stephanie that were read in court. "Tell them about my theories and about Jack London," he wrote to her. "Tell them there was a time I thought I was Jack." But after Joshua King LaRock died, his father testified that Jack London did not tell him to kill his son. In letters, LaRock also wrote that he dreamed of his son's death before it happened. "I just didn't believe it would be by me," he wrote. He also wrote to his wife, "I told you, if a person can change his blood flow, he could change the direction of the solar system and create a black hole." Before this trial, I had never heard of anyone believing that changing the flow of blood could create a black hole. Online, I read that black holes form when the center of a very massive star collapses in upon itself. LaRock's baby collapsed on himself after LaRock dropped him 4 or 5 times on his head. LaRock stopped dropping his baby after the child stopped crying. After the baby collapsed, the first thing LaRock did was to go for a cigarette. They lived in a tiny community of Springdale and had no phone. The baby's mother wanted to call an ambulance. LaRock told her to move the baby's high chair before calling. They would tell everyone that the baby was in the high chair for them to take pictures to send to Grandma. They would say that without the tray on the high chair, the baby fell out. When LaRock realized the child was not moving, they asked their neighbors to come in. While the neighbors tried to give the child CPR, both parents stood around smoking cigarettes. When they first came to West Virginia from Michigan, the family moved in with LaRock's sister, but she soon objected to the way he hit the children, so the family moved out. Their neighbor saw LaRock hit his son both with his fists and with a stick. A neighbor heard a baby crying. A social worker was called in, and the parents were supervised for 6 months. The baby died when he was only 19 months old, so the child was severely abused from the time he was only a few months old. LaRock turned himself into police. "I'm here to pay for my mistakes for killing my own son," he told the officers. LaRock used a square 2-foot, 7-inch long wooden stick on both children. His daughter was only 4 when LaRock went on trial for killing her baby brother. At his trial, LaRock said the board was not the proper instrument to use on his children. "I can't even call it discipline. I call it stupidity," he said. He also testified that he wanted his son to have a strong mind. He said most people have weak minds. He believed his infant son could understand what he wanted the child to do. In his frustration, when his son failed to follow, he admitted hurting his son, but he said he never meant to kill him. The children's mother saw all the abuse he was capable of and did nothing. When the case came to trial in Fayette County Circuit Court, LaRock never denied any of his actions that led to his son's death. His only defense, it was not premeditated murder. He also said that all of his wife's testimony was correct. On a regular basis, LaRock tied a rope or a rag around his baby's neck and carried him around the house, pulling on the rope and calling him names as he walked. LaRock complained to a social worker his son was not listening, eating, walking, and learning as LaRock thought he should. Approximately 10 to 14 days before the baby died, LaRock threw the child from one room into the bathroom where the child hit against the bathtub. Of course, the post-mortem exam showed that the baby suffered a skull fracture when he collided with the bathtub. With the skull fracture, the baby was not able to eat or walk as his father commanded. LaRock was trying to get his baby to eat and dropped him 4 or 5 times. The state medical examiner also found tears in the baby's esophagus that were 7 to 10 days old. These certainly accounted for why the baby did not want to eat. The infant also had 4 separate head injuries. The baby had old and new bruises all over him, as well as injuries to his legs and a hip. From the stand, LaRock told jurors he killed his baby. He also told them he wanted to serve his sentence and get as much help as I can so this will never happen again. He also said he desperately wanted another baby son. "I've already got a name picked out for him." LaRock had picked out his late son's name, Joshua King, from the names of books of the Bible. In closing arguments, then Fayette County Prosecutor Paul Blake urged jurors to make sure that LaRock never got a chance to father another child. The jurors found LaRock guilty of murder and did not recommend mercy. LaRock remains an inmate at Mount Olive Correctional Complex, serving a life sentence. Thanks to you for listening and to Tommy Siner for this recording. Please join me next Wednesday for a new episode of A Real Crime by Susan Williams.